television. There's been a lot of hullabaloo lately about Trevor Noah replacing Jon Stewart on The Daily Show. Obviously, The Daily Show is something that's been such a big part of my life for so long. I've mentioned before that I've seen literally every episode since I graduated from college. It's been this great source of stability and a great tension release from all the insanity of politics, and I think Jon Stewart is the medicine for the everyman dealing with the stress of the corrupt institutions of our society and the insane rat race that is politicians and their political campaigns. I read a great article today about, why he's leaving, and he talks, of course, about when he's wanting to spend time with his kids who are like 9 and 10, and that makes a lot of sense. Of course, we're coming up on another presidential cycle, and he covered 4 different cycles while he was running The Daily Show, and I think he's just really depressed by how, nothing's changing. It's all the same. It's all the ridiculous speculation and overindulgence on the little issues that really don't mean anything, like right now it's happening with these emails that Hillary Clinton sent. Whatever, none of that stuff matters. The talk never is about the real issues, and The Daily Show has always been fantastic about exposing hypocrisy, and, like Dick Cheney had a thing the other week where he was talking about, like, I can't imagine ever leaving a worse legacy for the next president, which is hilarious because of all the things that him and George W. Bush left for Obama: wars, debt, troubled foreign relations. And so for him to be saying, Obama's going to make things really terrible for the next president is hilarious. And of course, as usual, Jon Stewart had a fantastic run at making fun of that. So, man, I'm going to miss that guy. Anyway, Trevor Noah, I really like him. I like the segments I've seen him do on The Daily Show so far. There's a refreshing kind of energy to him, and obviously his perspective on the world is very different from Jon Stewart's, but it's equally, like, zoomed out in a way where he can be like, that's really weird that, this is something happening. It's really nice that he comes from South Africa and is able to bring that foreign perspective on, like, what America does. And I guess that's one of the appeals of someone like John Oliver, who also as a Brit is able to look at America and be like, oh, you silly Americans, and you really think you're on top of the world, don't you? And just knocking those people on their high horses down a few pegs, which I think is very healthy for everyone. Trevor Noah, I wanted to know a little bit more about his comedy, so my wife and I today watched one of his specials, which is streaming on Netflix, and it was great. It was really fun seeing the way that he talks about, wanting to come to America. The whole narrative that he kind of sets up is, I wanted to come to America to be black. And at first that's a weird thing to say, but he talks, of course, about growing up in South Africa, during the apartheid, where it was really a horrible thing to have a white father and a black mother, how, he was called all sorts of terrible things for that kind of mixed race condition. And of course in America, if you have this slightest bit of foreign blood in you or something, you're no longer white, you're no longer Caucasian, you're knocked down to whatever that other thing is that you have. 25% Cherokee, you're American Indian, which is a ridiculous term, and he goes and all that kind of stuff, and he talks about the excitement of going to America, and even though he's half white and half black, it's like, you are black now. And of course, Key and Peele have dealt with that, and President Obama's dealt with that, but it is a really kind of bizarre thing. And I always think of the Louis C.K. joke of how it's such a white American attitude to look at those things in that kind of terms. Like, he talks about, like, a white American could go to Africa and be like, wow, look at all the minorities here, and that's such a ridiculous perspective on the world. But anyway, I thought he was very funny. All the things that he's getting some controversy over now, again, I think they're basically non-issues. Comedians tell thousands of jokes. They're always testing material. They don't know if something's funny. And obviously, yeah, if a joke is racist or something like that and it lands, then a lot of people forgive it. And if it doesn't, then everyone's like, you're a terrible person. And he had some jokes that didn't land. That's fine. Forgive the guy. He's much younger than Jon Stewart was when he started doing The Daily Show. I want to give him a chance. I have a very good feeling that he's going to be great. I'm looking forward to Trevor Noah's Daily Show, and you should too. Justified ended this week. That was a show that I always enjoyed. It was different from a lot of the other shows I watched. I didn't have to pay like super close attention to the plot or anything like that. It wasn't a procedural show. It was definitely serialized, and each story arc and episode led to the next, and each season had a nice overarching plot, usually with a main villain and all that kind of thing. But it was just, on a week-to-week basis, consistently fun, clever. It works in this world of Elmore Leonard, who I would love to read more of but haven't yet, which the character of Raylene Givens is based on. I watched a little bit of Deadwood before Justified, so I came into Justified a few years ago. I think they were in season 3 with this mentality of like, oh, this is Timothy Oliphant's character from Deadwood, just in a modern setting, which I think is fine. But anyway, the whole thing lives in this Elmore Leonard territory of, you have a lot of stupid bad guys with very ambitious high goals, and you get to have Raylan there just kind of being like, you idiots. And, you know, anytime you have someone who thinks that they can pull on Raylan faster than he can pull on them, we always know how that ends. But it's Raylan is a fascinating character over these episodes. I wouldn't necessarily call him an anti-hero, but there's a rebellious kind of Han quality to him that was always really enticing to watch. Like, you know, you kind of get the impression early on the only reason he went into law enforcement was basically to piss off his dad, who, you know, was a criminal. And of course he has this whole relationship with Boyd Crowder, who was originally going to be killed off in the pilot, but watching, you know, him and Timothy Olyphant bounce off each other, there's such an interesting chemistry there. And Walton Goggins was so good in The Shield, you know, back in the early days of FX, that it was really, I think, a great decision to let that organically be an overarching rivalry over the course of the show. And what's nice is, you know, again, they always say that a great ending feels both inevitable and surprising, and I think everyone from very early on knew that the show needed to end with a big face-off between Raylan and Boyd, and we probably thought it was going to be a shootout, but I always thought that'd be kind of weird because Boyd never really fancied himself much of a gunslinger. That was always Raylan's deal, and so I think it was totally perfect that Raylan had an opportunity, very similar to the trouble he got in Florida in the very first episode of the show, I think, where it's like, oh, he has an opportunity to pull on a bad guy, kill him, and probably get away with it because he's a U.S. Marshal. Boyd basically gave him that opportunity. He's like, look, I'm not gonna try to shoot you. And Raylan makes the interesting choice to take him in. Even though we know that Boyd is probably gonna try to kill Ava, and, you know, there's all this other stuff happening that, you know, you could kind of make the case that the world would just be a better place without Boyd entirely. Raylan takes him in, and there's a really beautiful scene between them at the end. You know, he has a great scene with Ava, and you find out about a baby, and that's the kind of thing that could seem very soap opera-y on a different show, but it works very nicely here. And the final scene between Raylan and Boyd is so wonderful because, you know, there's not a brotherly love between them, but, you know, finally Boyd kind of says, like, oh, because Raylan's there to tell Boyd that, you know, Ava's dead and don't even go looking for her and all that kind of stuff. And Boyd has this moment where he's like, you know, you could have just called or written a letter. Like, why did you come all the way here to see me? And, you know, they start talking a little bit about, like, the relationship they have. And again, it's not affection, but Raylan says, you know, we dug coal together. Boyd says, that's right. And it's such a fascinating, simple thing, because, yeah, these are two guys who were in a really crummy situation in this crummy little town growing up where coal mining is really the only way to make a living, and then Raylan goes off and becomes U.S. Marshal, better life. Boyd goes off and becomes this really kind of terrifying criminal mastermind, both of whom don't really play by the rules, which is interesting. Raylan, for the last few episodes, has been a rogue. Walton Goggins, as Boyd, has always kind of been an outlaw, even in the sense of, you know, whatever kind of code you think criminals might have, and has always done unexpected things to the people that he's supposedly allied with, and that's made for a very dynamic relationship, because you could easily see a different world where maybe Boyd, for whatever reason, decided that he wanted to be working from within the law, and maybe he's a dirty cop or something, but it's very easy to also see Raylan become someone like his father, and maybe be there on the outskirts of the criminal world, and kind of using his charm to get what he needs to get done. So that's always been kind of an interesting relationship, and really got me thinking about just the seed that's there that I think could drive a lot of different plot lines of having two people that are in a similar crappy situation, and then they kind of grow together and find themselves in both having better lives, but in opposing ways somehow. I guess the easiest example of something like that is Magneto and Professor Xavier in X-Men. You know, but what's different there is it's almost like if Professor Xavier had also been in the Holocaust with Magneto, you know, as children or something like that, which in many ways would probably just make their bond that much stronger. But anyway, it's a really fascinating character study. Also reminds me a little bit of a musical I saw in London back in 2008 called Blood Brothers. Similar relationship. What am I talking about? Justified. I don't even know why I'm talking about the ending if you haven't seen it yet, but you'll probably forget about it. This happens to me all the time. Sometimes people spoil the end of something for me, and then I go back and I watch the thing and I totally forgot what they said. So sorry if you listened to all that and you haven't seen Justified yet and you want to watch it. Go ahead and watch it. Please do. It's a great show. It's a lot of fun. Great acting, great characters. This past season had some amazing actors that, you know, should have been in this world from the beginning, but I'm so glad. Like Sam Elliott, who played Lee Scoresby in the ill-fated Golden Compass adaptation. You know, people like that are so perfect for this world. Garrett Dillahunt, who was so good on Deadwood, they actually gave him 2 different character roles. They killed him and brought him back as a different character, which was great. He had a great little role on Justified this final season. Anyway, fantastic show. I give it 4 stars with a confidence of 5. I just saw episode 3 of the final season of Mad Men, and I'm starting to think that I see where the end game is going. This episode has so much uncertainty on Don's behalf. And, we ended last episode with Don standing in his empty apartment with this kind of, what the heck happened? What's my place and all this kind of look. And then we get something similar this final scene where he's standing outside the apartment after the apartment's been sold. And again, he's got this kind of lost boy quality where it's like, where do I go next with my life? In the whole episode, he's asking people, what's next? He has that great interview scene with Peggy, giving her review, where it's clear that, he's trying to work this stuff out for himself. And, maybe it's going to be as simple as that. Maybe he's going to leave the company and have Peggy replace him as the creative director, and then he's going to go retire. Or maybe it's going to be like the end of Thank You for Smoking, and he's going to find some other interesting way to implement his skill set. But I also really like the moments he has with Sally. And, he's asked Sally if Sally doesn't know what she wants to when she gets older. And Don, makes this observation that she is a lot like him and her mother, and tells Sally, if you ever do figure out what you want to be when you grow up, write it down because you're probably going to forget it. So there's so many nice little moments, and there's like a connecting theme and connective tissue to all this, and all the characters are getting some great beats. I really liked being able to have a real episode to focus on Joan. And maybe we're headed toward all the characters getting like a little Parks and Recreation style happy ending. Maybe this is Joan's new husband and everything's going to be great with that. And maybe we're going to head towards something where everyone gets a happy ending except Dawn, which in some ways could be kind of fitting. But again, I'm also wouldn't be surprised at all if the very final moment is Don just staring, out the window or something, and he has no idea what he's going to do next, and we still leave on that kind of cliffhanger thing. We have been told by Matt Weiner that the ending's going to be a little controversial, so, maybe they're not going to give us a real sense of where Don's going, and it'll be left totally up to us to figure that out. But I don't know, I feel like there's going to be some sense of closure where you'll at least know where he's going. Or maybe he'll get hit by a car or fall out a window or something silly that is just like, it's the end of his story. But, whatever. I'm enjoying this final season very much so far. I've thought all 3 episodes have been great. And so, hello, Kat. I give Mad Men Episode 3 5 stars with a confidence of 3. Just saw the 2nd episode of Game of Thrones this season. Again, I think they're doing some fantastic stuff. I am incredibly interested in the Arya plotline. I'm surprised by how much, I want to say, mixed feelings there are towards Arya. I've always thought she's an incredibly fascinating character, very badass, has a purpose and direction, and, the journey she takes over the course of the books is, in my opinion, probably the most interesting story. And it's so cool now to see her reunited with Jaqen H'ghar and Braavos, and her whole assassination plotline is going to be so cool, and I'm so excited for that. The stuff with Brienne and Pod meeting up with Littlefinger and Sansa was really cool. Both Sansa and Jon Snow, they both have this quality to me that makes it sometimes difficult for me to watch their storylines, because you're just there like begging them to make the right choice, and then they don't make the right choice. And if you've read the books, you know where that heads, and you're like, ugh. So there's a frustration there that in some ways makes their storylines a little bit less interesting. Even Brienne, who's a character I really like, at this stage, it's a little bit difficult to watch her storyline, only because there's so many dead ends, and she can never quite do anything productive. Like, it was such a cathartic release last season to get to see her fight the Hound, which again is different from the book, but worked so well in the show. And I hope they have something interesting planned for this season, and it's not just going to be, tracking Sansa the entire season and not quite getting anything to happen. Hopefully it follows kind of like a, Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas hunting Merry and Pippin kind of thing, where they can actually like rescue her, and we'll see. I actually am having a little bit of trouble remembering what happens in the book. There's a couple key moments that might be happening this season. It's been so long now, 2010 since I read the books, that it's this interesting blending point where I'll see something in the show and I can't tell if it's something that did happen in the book, didn't happen in the book, or close to something that happened in the book but is twisted in kind of a strange way. Anyway, the stuff with Daenerys right now, everyone wants to see her go to Westeros, and I totally understand why. I'm excited to see Varys and Tyrion get there and start to interact with her in an interesting way. It's always nice to see her connecting to Westeros in some kind of way. It was really nice to see Ser Barristan arrive to talk to her, and to see her kind of react a little bit to what Ser Barristan can talk about firsthand with the Mad King Aerys, which, as he tells her, he really was crazy. And so that's all I think about Game of Thrones right now. Very cool to see the dragon again. I know what's going to happen with that, and it's going to be fun. So, Hooray, special effects department. The show looks beautiful now. I don't know if the budget's gotten bigger or what, but it looks fantastic. Everything from the cities to the dragons to the costumes and the people and the number of extras they're able to get. Good job, Game of Thrones. I give episode 2 5 stars with a confidence of 3. Channel 101, for anyone who doesn't know, this is a thing that was started by Dan Harmon, who created Community years ago, and they produce basically a film festival every month, 8 months out of the year, where they select 10 episodes of something to put on. Each episode needs to be 5 minutes or less, and then every week, 5 episodes are chosen to go on and make another 5 episodes, and the other 5 shows are canceled. Just like that, they can't come back, it's over. So I think I mentioned in one of these episodes that a few of my friends involved with like Dystopia, Pia, and Slacktory and other, venues that I've been involved with in the city were putting on something called Jaywalk Cop, which was based on an idea from my friend Dan, which was basically just, hey, what if there's a cop who took jaywalking very seriously, and it wasn't just like a silly thing, but like everyone took him really seriously in his pursuit of jaywalkers. And so the first episode was a hit. It got 2nd place out of 10. The second episode was even better. There was an incredible production value. It had like a Skyfall level, hacking scene, which was really great. And then the third episode, they decided to scale back and maybe try to keep things a little bit simpler, and the whole thing took place in a car, and it was basically a banter episode, and I thought it was still really funny, but it did not come in the top 5, so the show was canceled, and that was kind of sad. But I still recommend, even though it's over now, and even though episode 4 was going to be fantastic, and now it will never be written, you should check out all 3 of the episodes. They all have a really different flavor to them. I think there's some really clever things going on. Nick and Dan are fantastic actors, writers, all that kind of stuff, and I just look forward to seeing whatever they do next. And I have a couple ideas for what it might be, but I'll let you know when they actually do it. We got to go to a cast party after, by the way. It's fun. There's been this tradition in our theater groups ever since college that whenever anything is over, regardless of what it is, we always go to a diner, usually a 24-hour diner, since we were usually getting out of things pretty late. I had a very big slice of New York-style cheesecake, and it was great. Also good to see my friend Anton, who you might remember from many episodes ago. His wife is giving birth next month. Very exciting to talk to him about what those final stages are like and what his life is like and the preparations they're doing for the baby. So, it's really cool and nice to have other people who I know, like my stepsister, who are also, giving birth soon. And of course, Facebook is both great and horrible for knowing everything about people's, pregnancies and personal lives and all that kind of thing. But it really makes me feel like, I'm not alone in this whole process, and it's really wonderful to have these support of other people and being able to chat with other people and get different opinions on things. Like I told my office this week about everything going on with the baby, and right away got so much wonderful advice from everyone. So anyway, that's cool. More in the baby section. Jaywalk Cop was a fun show. I had a great little run of 3 episodes. I give it 4 stars with a confidence of 5. Check out all 3 episodes here.